To use a HM term, I just thought I'd give you a bit of context for those in the room that might not know me, to sort of my journey, and that might help to know where I'm coming from the information and how I can help you. To start out, just at uni, I actually did my honours project on nitrogen mineralisation, of all things. So even in my last year at university, was seeing the value of biology, even though guys that were supporting my project couldn't quite understand why I wanted to look at what I wanted to look at. That's actually with the nitrogen mineralisation potential of the Warwick site, which is actually just west of here, so some of you might be familiar. They had a wonderful 30-year long-term trial site there, looking at different pasture and cropping rotation with wheat and fallow. Ram Dalal was heading up that project, and he pretty much looked at any nutrient you can consider in the main spectrum, as they did in those days. He was only meant to do carbon and nitrogen, but often I speak to people and they're not even familiar with that project, and it's right here and local, and there's a wealth of knowledge there. You know, even for that project, I looked at whenever we did a sampling, well, that was going to influence the biology in my mind. It was like a tillage. Great results came of that. We took it right through to protein as well, so it's not only yield and protein, but and also a coefficient of the influence of those different rotations in terms of the carbon-nitrogen ratio. So it was chickpea, medic, lucerne, and then wheat, and then a long-term fallow, as was the common practice in that time. So a good one to dig out if anyone's curious about that. Post-uni, I then went into the very conventional space. I was a cotton CRC Extension Development Officer in Dolby. But then that was a very innovative industry, cutting-edge technology, very interesting. You know, a lot of what we're saying of the degenerative, I guess, even though at that time they thought they were very cutting-edge. It was in a lot of ways, but it was also very taxing on our soil health bank. Also had a stint within the new industry department, so looking at hemp, linseeds and all sorts of different crops, because I had a bit of a passion in coriander and things like that as well. So looking at crops outside the square to look for the opportunities to change up people's rotation, especially in cotton, and also management of their residues. I really wanted to change up and not see all this fire harrying going on. So that was, you know, way back in the 90s. Had a stint with Primac around Meandara. Then we headed to the Northern Territory. And it was in the Northern Territory that I tracked down, or actually across the border in Kununurra region, that I tracked down Elaine Ingham. And I was on Kachana Station, which is also practising under the holistic management philosophy. So in one hit, in the middle of nowhere, I was bombarded with Elaine Ingham's work and holistic management, and it did pivot and change my life from that point of view. I went on to win Rhotic Rural Women Award for Northern Territory, and the aim being to utilise those funds to actually become more educated in Elaine's space and become one of her certified advisors. And promptly with the change of my mindset and whatnot, and my understandings, I didn't quite fit in the departmental area of my job as the Extension Development Officer for Katherine region. So hence, something that I actually thought up, and Roger's there, he was in the Dolby office. I actually thought of Bear Biologics while I was actually working in Dolby, but it came to life, while I was in the Northern Territory. My passion is Bear Biologics. If I was wanting to know something of an educator, I decided, well, why not actually host that educator and learn together. So I guess out of that grew creating events, which many of you in the room have come to, with a wide range of international speakers or local speakers. Increased my regenerative coaching sort of business as well. So that's to give you a bit of context about me. Bear Biologics, to give the specifics, my name is Sarah, so if you can imagine I did have a nickname Bear. The whole Sarah Bear, you probably know a Sarah that's got that. But I guess it morphed into, for me, those letters stand for Bare Essential Agricultural Resource. So, which pretty much, the biology is essential, one of those. The soil, the plants, the human component is a resource. So you're all bare essential core parts of your business functioning and thriving. I guess this information might be shown to you in several different directions, because I guess we probably established that we really are making that link between what is microbe health, soil health, plant health, animal health, human health. It is all interconnected. So this one I actually was doing because I was really keen to actually complete the full loop for my training. So I actually did quite a bit of training with a human health coach. And this was his 7 principles of health. But I saw that it really did relate to our world as well. Air, water, sunshine, exercise. So they're all important for us, but can you connect to the fact of the living entity that we're working with as farmers, that these are all core and key to them as well? And exercise, we could think about that in multiple ways, but for our marine clays out here, just the cracking action of that could be seen possibly as an exercise. But core part here, what we're doing now, community, relationship. Please look around the room and find the people that might be in your area, or maybe not, they're talking about something interesting, and keep this relationship going from this day forward, because they'll be so valuable. And the passion, I guess, this is a big one, especially from our holistic management perspective. When you're creating your holistic context, we call it now, you really connect into the why you're making the changes within your system, and I guess that helps you really connect with the passion for what you're doing. And whole foods, we like to eat good quality foods, and this is what we're about here, is trying to do that also for the microbes and also for the soil, for the plants. So they want actually fully intact, nutrient-dense substrates to be eating on or consuming in their life cycles as well. So if you can really connect with the fact that you're a living organism and we're managing a living organism, even though it might seem essentially to look at inert, but we've heard plenty about the fact that it isn't today, it sort of gets easier perhaps to manage those things that you know are important to you, are just as important for your soil and your plants and your animals. So yes, back to this why, it leads to the commitment to how you find these hows. So there's multiple different ways that people are approaching their regenerative journey, and they can actually all be quite individual in some sense, and you'll learn lots of different ways and you'll change that up. You'll, as Marty says, upside down, inside out, left, right, you'll work that through for your context and what it is that your goals are. And what really keeps you strong on that pathway is being connected to that why. Why? And to be authentically honest today, for me, the real big indicator for change in my agricultural career was literally getting very unwell from all the research work that I had to do in the industry. I literally could tell what a farmer had sprayed for how I felt. And at one point I went to a health practitioner for assistance, and he said, I'd like to turn you into a bit of a case study and research you, because reactions in your nervous system and how your spine is moving and blah, 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 it's not how it should be. So that was really not a place I wanted to be, and hence for me that was a driver for change, and we'll all have that different driver that has us in the room today that's driving the reason why we're trying to learn better. Again, it's that critical thinking, and I love to help people work this through. I guess that's love, the problem solving. It's diversity, 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 but again it's that every sphere. We're not just talking the soil, not the plants, but diversity of who you hang out with, who you get to have a conversation with. You know, it's so relevant even for us. Because how many times you might hear something, you're going, oh yeah, I've heard that, but it comes to you from a slightly different angle for someone, and suddenly you have that aha, and off you go. My presentation today, I'm really wanting to push a few paradigms, and I guess one way to really think, why is it that we even produce the products that we produce? Ultimately, somewhere in the food web, it gets consumed, is turned either into making more of that organism or whatnot. But it's a transference of energy, isn't it? Really. So really a lot of this is actually about the efficiency by which we do what we do and hope to make and aim to make $1, but really we are all in different places within the food web transferring energy. And some of where we can improve even our economies in efficiency, is how well we do in energy efficiency. I guess I'm just putting that one out there to move the grey matter around perhaps. We were at paddock yesterday afternoon and there was lots of plant material, but it wasn't because of fertilisers. So yeah, just reconnecting to this, all this workforce here, including the plants, because whether we want them to feed our animals or feed us, or this is a huge resource. So we consider sunlight to be a free resource, rainfall to be a free resource. And then really, if we look after all those cool things like aeration, providing food, providing good structure, shelter for all the organisms, wherever they may be within the food web, essentially this is a free workforce as well. We've just got to create the conditions and support what they need and connect with that. This one, I guess it's a good representation of degenerative, where we're doing a lot of the decisions and inputs, very top heavy on NPK, not much consideration of micronutrients and the microbiome, quite small. Whereas a soil healthy diet, NPK is still in the conversation because it's coming from the substrate of soil and from the whole system, air as well, but micronutrients and the good metabolism and the good relationship between microbe and plant is more functional. One of the areas for me in my consultancy, I really want to help people understand all the areas that they could be getting nutrition and support coming from. So not necessarily just the soil solution as such and what will affect fertilising, but really getting to understand when we get available nutrients, but then we also get total nutrient results, and we get Haney soil tests, and we get full food web analysis. I'm doing that to educate my client how that all fits together and how we manipulate that. I guess part of the excitement of me doing soil food web course is I could actually see when you understood the dynamics of the biology under the soil, it related to what you saw above the soil and vice versa. And that was something that, yeah, you could tweak either way, either from how you fed the microherd and what plants develop. So pretty exciting. So I guess, yeah, trying to get you to see there's so much more than what we used to think of roots intercepting the nutrient in the soil solution and really connecting the important part of that 85 to 90% of all these processes actually need a living organism in there to help you out. And we need to help them help us. And as soon as we put an inorganic fertiliser into the system, we're taking away someone's job. When you have so much available nutrient in soil solution, there's actually, the organism and the plant might not actually make the relationship that we want them to make. So it sets you up right from the beginning to not actually have that relationship that can support you throughout the whole production life cycle of that plant. So this is one of the key components. I think, you hear it from the Coal Masters, you hear it from Christine, you hear it from Gabe Brown. Something to workshop through your head. Can I ditch the plough and cover up and grow diversity? We're hearing plenty today that that's what we need to do, and lots of values in that. And it's keeping a living plant for as long as possible in the year. And that can be challenging in cropping, when we're intensive cropping, but we've got to try and don't leave as much, down to weeks if we can, where we don't have bare ground. Keep that liquid carbon pathway flowing into the ground. I just wanted to give some examples here of where possibly I might push some ideas for you guys and help you think of how we could do things that don't quite go with what you might think would work. This is a client where we're setting things up, we're working on soil health, but we've got peanuts in the rotation. Now peanuts, just the nature of how they've got to dig them in the ground for harvest and whatnot, is actually quite harsh on the soil profile at harvest. It can be a bit of an uphill battle to actually be working on soil health when we've got such invasive harvest. It was an 8-way mix and it did cover the 4 functional groups. It was planted in October in Kingaroy. So we wanted to keep living plant in that system for as long as possible before the peanuts went in. Peanuts are highly mycorrhizal, so we were trying to work on the fact of having multi-species mixed in there. We'd have mycorrhizal reserves that hopefully could reenact and help with the peanuts following this rotation that we worked on. So here you see he's mulching that down. So there's a hell of a lot of biomass there. You know, it was up like this. So huge amount of microbiome food. Now, after we slashed that down, it did start all coming back because there was still, you know, some time, still some heat. We actually had no rain following the mulching. Lots of things were eye-openers for this farmer. The amount of water cycle happened in that multi-species. The aim to try and extend a growing plant in the system through to September was we planted oats. So that's actually 40 kilos of oats went into an already 8-way multi-species. So you can see the rows. He was surprised. He said, I went 40 kilos because I wanted to make sure they had a chance. He goes, darn it, I think they all came up. And the interesting thing was that everyone in the multi-species came back up as well. So we had still the perfect rows of oats, but we had the return of the canopy of the multi-species to about waist height. And then, as I had hoped, a really nice frost came through and took out the multi-species and left the oats. So that's showing what can happen if we take the oats. So that oats actually went in that section through to seed. The upper section went into peanuts. It was turned in and things getting prepared then for the peanut crop in late August. But you can see the amount of residue on the ground here. And he rang me up and said, come and have a look, because he started to get concerned the amount of volunteer stuff that we started to have coming along here. And there's still been no rain in this. We still have that really functional little microclimate in there. To add a sad note, you know, look at those beautiful road systems. They were slashing an area in between the two zones. The workmen hit a rock when this was ready for harvest, and the whole lot burned. Oh. So I didn't get the end data. So it's sad, but that's impressive. So I guess, yeah, that's pushing paradigms of what we can do with this stuff. And because the aim for that was to go through to cash. And he had sold that potentially like 20 times over. There was horse manure in the paddock where people with horses had come for an inspection. It was quite hilarious. Yeah, it was high demand. This is a slightly different example back in the Northern Territory. This is a project with Landcare. So we had 3 sites that we were doing soil and soil biology and soil chemistry analysis on. But also the aim was to show through holistic management and our decision making how we could shift the landscape towards what their ideal grazing country, what they were looking for. So this is near Mataranka. Why the 2 photos is to try and give you an indication. In November, that's what it was looking like in the dry, and then after the wet. So this was an open area, had limited grass, but native legume tree was present, which is as good as having like Illicina in there. They love it. They always head straight for that. But we had capping on the soil, if you can see, you know, in those bare areas, and limited tree cover. So that was one of the areas they were wanting to see, and that was from their decision making, their context. You'd have to agree it is a lot better than the previous. Yeah, sort of the different times of the year, just help people see that it's not a dry land or a dry season or a wet season sort of impact. And then I guess the main problem area was where we'd had the invasion of wattle. Lots of leaf litter, but very little grass, and hence basically no grazing. So to give a layer of other things that I was looking at, in that region, in Mataranka, they had a very good relationship with the Indigenous group because I had a lease with them as well. And interestingly, we talk wet season, dry season, but for that area around Mataranka, they actually had 7 seasons that they consider as from an Indigenous point of view. And it was things like firefly, lightning, termite. So it was in relationship to their activity and things that they observed in the landscape. Their seasons were very much linked to observations of landscape. So I wanted to look at that sort of stuff along with them in amongst this trial. And we were doing, part of that was not only observations of the plants growing, but also from the soil food web analysis, and I measured according to their seasons. And you did actually see quite significant changes. It's all holistic management and animal impact. So for the wattle, they literally used their bullocks And they knew there was not much grazing in there for them, but it was the amount of, the numbers and the time. And so they actually literally used them. They're happy for them to fight, all the rest of it, no one got hurt, but they literally knocked that wattle over, the animals, with their argy-bargy. That's how they did the fencing in that area. And so with the wattle lying down, you had little microclimates underneath all that sticked area and whatnot. And so that's where the grass returned. And so that's now, it's not quite to the ideal site number 2, but you would nearly not know you're in that same spot. So we had the transition. And with the grazing, the capping is gone in that area where we didn't have many trees, and we now got more of the legume trees and some of the other natives returned. So it's very much looking like site 2. So we've had a success. So I guess it's that changing up how we might be working on things, is these examples. So another example a bit closer to home. So this is at Warwick, at the Lewis's place. And the aim for this trial was to do a multi-species no-kill, but also they've got a lipia issue, as you can see. Because when there's some reasonable amount of rainfall, this whole area can go underwater. For this project, we took plant tissue analysis of the lipia to see what they possibly were getting the upper hand with, and it had a hell of a lot more available calcium and boron, interestingly. Ideally for this trial, it would have been nice to have the grazing impact before we went in, but as you know, with the seasons how we've had them, they didn't have the number of animals to actually have achieved that and in their rotation plan. So this is a locally available planner set up for hire. It actually went through all of that material quite well. The only time where it was to deal with was where you went through a lot of that really dense nest grass. But even in those patches, it was very successful seed placement. It's all untreated seed, and Christine will be happy to see that we did actually have 4 functional groups covered, I believe. We also had organic sources of nutrient, rock phosphate and wormhead. Wormhead, so all this went down the slot with the seed, and very much to activate that zone of where the seeds are, to give them the greatest opportunity to get going in that slot, because that's where life begins, instead of treating a broad acre. And we definitely needed an increased carbon from the low carbon levels in the soil. So doing that within the zone where the seed's going to get active. In practice, we had the seed treated with active start, worm juice and an inoculant, of course, for the legumes. So the season didn't quite go our way in terms of getting the establishment that we all dream of, but as Gabe says, you've got to start somewhere. Sometimes you have some fails, but we had everyone present and accounted for and growing. At times had some of the canopy, that's where the grazing would have been better, a little bit, canopy closure over the top of them, and we needed a bit more rain back then for the right time for this, because this was, last. I just quickly put in a couple of slides from yesterday, and probably more by ways of saying thank you to Russell and Jenny for having us, but I guess also the value in those incidental trials that we might have and what value might come from those. There's actually 2 different planting dates that's going on there. So you can really see, I guess, the timeliness of getting all your ducks in a line and getting things out there when earlier in the season. But then we don't actually really know exactly how the season might roll, so things might turn out well for this planting as well. So I guess there's value in hedging your bets sometimes to have staggered plantings as well. And we're also very excited because we found a couple of those worms. So, with my eventing and with consulting and things that I do, and there is actually a Darling Downs regenerative group that we need to sort of bring a bit more life into. We'll forget about the whole COVID hoo-ha and we'll just all get together in the paddock. We don't have to worry about that then. But the value in getting together yesterday and doing more of that, of all of us yarning, as Martin said, in all different groups about all sorts of different things, and then coming together and sharing a bit more of that. But, to point out too, look at this growth that's in this paddock. And again, there's just inoculant down, liquid inject at time of planting. There's no other fertilisers. So you couldn't actually say that there's growth is being limited there necessarily by lack of fertiliser in the system. Beautiful colour. So yeah, just by that, I just want to say with a nice sunset photo, thank you very much, Jenny and Russell, for having us yesterday, and thank you to everyone for coming.